So I wanted to start by inquiring on what you just said because you wanted to talk about complexity
Yeah.
and you made a camera program,
Yeah.
but you said that you didn't want to use it for this application because it didn't use the GPU.
Yeah.
What does that matter?
Um, the only reason why I would want to use a GPU for rendering frames of camera output is because the way that the other program worked was it used X11 image, and it would how that X11 image worked, it would effectively mem copy the data back and forth between the CPU and the GPU. It would also do a a color format transform, so it would change it from YUV to RGBA, which is what it would expect for the input. And I just don't want it to have CPU spikes when we're doing a video recording, in case that CPU spike affects the audio recording or anything else.
Hmm. So here you would trade complexity for performance.
Yeah, this is one of the times when um, sometimes more complicated software is required for better performance. I mean, in an ideal world, if the GPU APIs were simpler, it would actually be simpler. This is a GPU API moment.
Hmm. I think that's going to become a theme. So you want to talk about code complexity.
I do want to talk about code complexity. Um, Anything in particular? I mean, I can talk just about how complicated code is in general in the wild that you will interact with on a day-to-day basis, or do you just mean from like an ideological perspective?
I mean, from an ideological perspective, right? Because I believe that sometimes complicated build processes are just an extension of the fact that the problem you're working on is complicated, right?
I would disagree. There's a lot of there's a lot of ways to make building a program very simple. Um, Now, I would like to say and interject quickly that uh, the languages that really have the most complicated and annoying build processes are C and C++, because they're old languages without inherent build processes built into them. So this is going to be very specifically targeted towards C and C++, and most specifically the linking process. Now, um,
Now, see, when I tried to use GTK,
yeah,
right, I first tried to vendor it because you told me that was a good idea. And, well, you told me vendoring in general was a good idea. And I tried it and I had a pretty good time.
sure,
And I'm like, okay, now I want to use a GTK backend for this application. And I cloned the repo and I asked the chatbot, hey, how do I get this to work?
okay,
And I think I spent like $5, $10 trying to get GTK to build statically from a vendor clone of the repository.
yeah,
It just didn't work, right?
yeah,
Obviously, that's not good. And now when I see, I saw something just yesterday. It was like, oh shoot. Oh, I think it was the Sixel thing you showed me, where you said it was complicated, And the way that I know that it's complicated unnecessarily is because it has like mason.txt and cmakelist.txt and all this stuff.
Yeah, not only is it using complicated build systems, it has many of them for some reason.
But
Yeah,
okay, but here's my point, right?
yeah,
When I gave up and decided to play in their court
yeah,
and say, okay, I'm just gonna dynamically link it right to the GDK SO that's on my computer.
yeah.
It was extremely pleasant, right? I did package dash config
Yeah, I mean
list
that
or
is
whatever of the file, and then I got all of the compiler commands that I need to be able to compile with the shared object. Right.
yeah.
That was very nice
Mm-hmm.
when I played in their little sandbox.
Yeah, I mean that is how they want you to interact with their software, right? They want you to dynamically link it, and you were working against them by trying to statically link it. I would make the argument that I mean there is a whole thing with dynamic linking and API breaking and all sorts of fun things there, which is why I'm very much a proponent of static linking and vendoring in general. Um, but I feel like I'm going on a little bit of a tangent. Um, so there are simple ways to build things in C and C++. One of them is Unity builds, right? Where you just include the C files into one big C file, and then you just
Amalgamation.
amalgamation. Yeah, a lot of libraries have been heading in this direction. Recently, there's been an influx of so-called STB single header libraries, which have
That's new.
no, not really. Sean Barrett has been making them since 2010, or no, even before that. If you look on his website, I'm sure you can see old versions of it from the late 2000s. But just because he's been doing it doesn't really mean that the community at large has been doing it. But they have taken people have taken a liking to them, and it's because they simplify the build process so much, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just one file that you include one time in your project somewhere, and it makes use of the same thing that a Unity build does in that it just dumps the implementation into the translation unit when it gets compiled. Instead of needing to link against a dynamic library or anything else. And even if you're going down the so what the one thing that people might say is, okay, what about hot reloading? This is the only genuine use case that I know where having dynamic linking is actually preferable, because what you would do is, if you have a debug build and you want to change something in your code and you're in your debugger and you have some kind of problem and you want to check it, what you would want is to not need to stop the program uh, when you make the code change, and the code would just update at, into the running program, so that in your debugger you can see, okay, this changed, and so this is how I would fix whatever problem you have. And in that very particular case, you would want to have a harness, and you would want that you run your main program in, and you would want to be able to dynamically, you would want to compile every single translation unit as a separate SO file, so that when you write to the file, you can use something like iNotify on Linux. I'm sure there's something very similar on Windows. And the harness would see, oh, this file has been written to, recompile it, and then link it back into the program, right? And that is only possible with SO files, right? But if we're not talking about that very particular thing with hot reloading. Unity builds and even just simple uh, batch scripts or shell scripts or a makefile at most is really all you need, even for extremely complicated projects. Um, a particularly complicated project that I would point to um, that should give people an idea of how complex of a project you can get to with just an SH file and a Unity build is the RAD debugger. RAD debugger is a debugger, a GUI debugger made by Epic. It's um, probably the most popular upcoming debugger, and it's a complicated project. No one would claim otherwise. It's multiple hundreds of thousands of lines of code, and they build it with Unity build, and it's fine. It works just fine. Um, and uh, build systems are just like a lot of things in programming, where it's just a convention, and people have adopted a particularly bad convention, and we all suffer as a result of it. That's pretty much it. That's that, and a lot of code complexity falls down to this, that we have bad conventions as programmers, and as a result, everyone suffers.
Okay, but if you take GTK, right?
Yeah.
I think GTK, I think it matters more. I think like the whole package manager thing is something that they have to care a lot more about, right? Like there are many programs that link against GTK that they need to account for. Many different kinds of package management as well, right? So maybe from like I'm just trying to think of other like advantages to playing in their sandbox, right? Because if the only goal is to get your sweet, beautiful .so or .a file or whatever,
Yeah.
it makes no sense, right? Logically, because you can achieve that in better ways. But maybe like how I said with like the package dash config, like I put package dash config libgtk4 or whatever in my make file,
Yeah.
and then package config figured out all of the other libraries that I need to link against to support GTK into my program, and now bada bing bada boom, I have a GTK program, right? So those kinds of developer experience wins. So I guess the only way to convince you that that is acceptable, because I imagine in my head that the only way to get what I experience with package-config inside of my makefile is to have some kind of more complicated build system that can statically analyze all of the dependencies of a project, right? So that means you got to play in the sandbox. And the only way to justify that is to justify all of the dang libraries that you link against, right? Because you link against a lot.
Yeah.
So this is where I'm gonna advocate for complex software, even in the miniature case, because I really like running native software, right? The idea that you are building on top of a framework that has deep ties to the operating system beneath it, right?
I mean, I guess you should ask yourself, do you should that even be the case?
It should. That's what I'm saying. It should.
I don't know. I feel like you can make UI frameworks that aren't so necessarily integrated into the system that you can't just use any UI framework that you want to.
No, that's the purpose of the UI framework, is to have that symbiosis.
I don't know. I feel like a lot of people would prefer it if they could just use whatever UI framework they wanted to, and it was back-end agnostic. Because I feel like a UI layout engine shouldn't really care about how it's being rendered. If you look at something like Nuclear
Mm-hmm.
or Micro UI
Mm-hmm.
or Clay, all of these
So you're talking about the layout
are.
engine piece. I'm talking about everything but that.
But then you're talking about having a built-in RHI for your layout engine. That's a different
What's an
problem.
RHI?
A rendering hardware interface.
No, that's not what I'm talking about either. I'm talking about the OS integrations, right?
That is the OS integration.
What is a file, right? What is a user?
Okay, but why is that in the UI framework? Why is that not an operating system specific thing? And you just have your platform layer, and then in the platform layer, you would interact with the file system or.
Well, because I feel like that platform layer is eventually going to want to creep into your UI, right?
No, it can be separate.
Well, for example,
Actually, no, it should always be separate. Period.
hmm.
Like in your program, in your application, obviously you're going to want OS functions to interact with your UI functions. You want to be able to press a button that does a thing. But at the underlying level, you don't want to have a dependency between your platform and your UI. That doesn't make any sense.
It makes a lot of sense.
No.
So say there's a screen reader program. I think there's one named after a shark that people use. The accessibility angle is real, okay? The accessibility angle is real. So
even with accessibility, the accessibility doesn't change how you fundamentally develop the two systems. You can have accessibility within the UI without the need to integrate it into how users work on the system.
no, that was just another example.
No, but anything, there's no platform specific thing that determines how accessibility works. In fact,
Sure
here's a classic example. Browsers have accessibility and screen readers, right? But
it's a bit different.
Why is it different? They have the platform implementation layer, right? The particular specifics of the V8 engine and other parts of the browser are the platform layer, and these create an interface into which you write your accessibility code for the layout engine, the DOM and HTML and CSS, right? That is what that is. It is an abstraction that allows you to create accessible UI without the need to directly interact with the OS, which necessarily implies that you don't need an interconnect between the UI.
Well, the difference is the fact that those accessibility tools target the browser, right? And there's not going to be an accessibility tool that targets your program.
No, but that's when you go into platform layer.
And also the DOM has like accessibility APIs, right, that you put into your markup. So
here's but there are accessibility tools that target X11 and Win32. This is just true, right?
If you make it accessible.
Yeah, but that just means that you need to interact with the X11 and Win32 APIs that allow it.
No one's doing that. That sounds hard.
Just because something is hard doesn't mean that
you don't do that with your micro UI.
I have done that.
You have a platform layer, but you still build your UI on top of that.
Yeah, you should. But I'm saying that they should be independent of one another. You can swap out whatever platform layer you want. That's the point. I would, to make a comparison with accessibility, I implemented the UIM input so that you can use UIM. It's an IME, right? So you can use CJK input in X11, and you just do it, right? There is a thing because X11 and Win32 are very mature APIs that have various accessibility options, such as screen reader support and UIM input or UIM IME input, right? And so you just need to go to your platform layer, irrespective of your UI, implement this thing, expose a backend agnostic API for dealing with it, and then do it. That's just because as soon as your separate systems, be that your UI, be that your rendering, be that your platform windowing layer, be that your user input, be that your audio, as soon as there are dependent connections between them, you enter into this hell where these separate pieces become harder and harder to extract from one another, which means that your system effective automatically becomes less modular.
Yeah, that's fine.
It can be, it can be fine, but it makes your software harder to reason about, and it makes it harder to design software which is fault tolerant and doesn't have issues
I mean,
that
if the
spread around the software. As long as the modules are strict, then if a failure inside of one will only affect itself, and so you won't have this problem where you change one thing somewhere and then it breaks something somewhere else. This is the classic thing that happens in OOP software, where you have gigantic class hierarchies that cause issues in other parts of the system just by changing a class somewhere else.
I mean, I hear you, right? And I guess all the examples that I'm gonna say, like gamepad input or um, one of the cool things about GTK was that in the file picker, you can have Google Drive and other like cloud stored stuff built into the GTK file picker, right? And I imagine I didn't get that far, but you can plug in a cloud um, file hoster specific to your program, right? Like maybe in your program you auth with Google or whoever, and then from there, like just for that application, right? That application is logged into Google, so it can access, files on the internet. I thought that was pretty cool, and I feel like that is the platform layer, right? Um, if you're saying that like maybe something like GTK could turn into, see, in the web we did this like 3 years ago now, where everything became headless for a little while, right? So you would have a UI framework that knew what a dropdown was and how to style it and all the accessibility things, but actually it didn't know how to style it, right? It gave you very bare bones primitives on how the functionality should work, but it didn't tell you what it should look like, right? And
Hmm.
that became extremely popular because there's lots of trends in the web and they move around like a moving target and all that. I just kind of wish there was the same thing for native where we had a really solid foundation to build more abstractions on top of. But you would probably say like, well, if you want gamepad support, just grab in the gamepad API from Linux or
That is
an
the
SO
that is
file
the
or something.
abstract that is the abstraction layer that you're talking about. There is input. You have its input events. It's the same input events that you use for your mouse and your keyboard.
Yeah.
That's how you get the gamepad. It's the same thing.
Yeah,
It's
and
just a different input event.
look, I ended up agreeing with you because I ended up not liking GTK because it has really bad ergonomics for UX around very specific things, and I couldn't get it to render my application at greater than 60 frames per second, no matter how much I tried. because I didn't have the right compositor or something. I don't know. Um, but it was like, hey, like I'm because you don't tell it render at X frames a second. You declare, hey, there's been an update. Go ahead and re-render.
Sure.
But there's a limiter on that at 60,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't determine any way to get around that.
Yeah.
So I get it, and I guess if you're a C programmer, just grab the SO file. That's fine. I just I don't know. I'm a bit unconvinced that the actual taking these pieces and building like web APIs are really good at this, right? Like you'll have a concept like clipboard or downloading a file, and it'll be just a handful of functions, right? Very small. And that function will throw up the file picker for the user. It will like pick it and save it and do all that. And you can say, hey, this is going to be a PNG, or you can only upload PNGs and stuff like that. So you can tell the file picker to ignore all the other files, right? These
Yeah.
kinds of things are they're fine to do. They're easy. It's not hard, right? The issue is that it's extremely like I just wish that there was more conventions, like one platform, because the web is one platform, right?
Yeah.
And I wish that there was that one very nice platform there for everybody to build on top of for native. And that requires complex software because that is a lot of shit, to deal with.
Well, this is my argument for creating independent platform layers, right? Because if you have a single API that everything, because by saying you're targeting a particular operating system, you've already admitted that there are different ones, and so you're going to need to implement a wrapper around each one to the same, right? If you want to have this agnostic thing, because you could just target one operating system, right? You can just target Win32, you can just target Cocoa or whatever it is on macOS, and you can just target X11 or just Wayland or whatever, right? You can do this, but it's not platform agnostic. And so the thing that you want is to create platform agnostic API. There are some libraries that already do this. It's like GLFW and GFW that do things like this. Uh, but but you shouldn't use those because they're hard to extend, right? You should make your own platform layer
Why?
because you can't extend GLFW. If you want a clipboard system,
That's
if
just
you
the
want
rendering. What about like spawning in a daemon, right?
exactly
For your
that's
for your
what
program.
that's why you would want your own platform layer implementation because then you can extend it to have, hey, I want to be able to spawn a process. Hey, I want to be able to have signals, right? I want to be able to interact with
We'll do some IPC stuff.
do some IPC. Do you want to have shared memory? A bunch of stuff. You can do a bunch of stuff, but you need to have a platform to be able to do this and to be able to extend. And
This is where I'm gonna really disagree with you.
but this abstraction you're talking about is the thing that you're asking for. It's the single.
I just want it to be
point.
good.
It's a single entry point. It can be good. People do this all the time.
Why is it being done all the time? Why isn't it just good? If it was good, then everybody would use it.
Because it's been normalized in native programming that like you just own platform.
Yeah, that's a bad normalization.
Because people need different things. You have the API that each platform gives you. You make a wrapper, and okay, I can see a good future, right, where there is one platform abstraction that everyone uses, is very small, and exposes every single every single functionality that you would want from every single operating system. But as you just pointed out, if this was a de facto standard that everyone used, it would not be small. It would not be simple. There is far too much brain rot. I don't know any other correct word to describe how people
Look,
how
this
the,
is
how
my
the compounding effect of many people's
this is
bad
my
decisions
defense of
create bad
complex software, not my defense of complex software that currently is. I don't think such a platform abstraction exists that is good, right?
yeah
If anything, it's possible. I want to look into it. It's possible that things like Raylib and Godot have struck this boundary well, right? If those if those frameworks, I'll call them,
yeah
have decent abilities to draw 2D graphics, right, for any GUI application, they look like ass. I mean, Raylib looks like ass out of the box to make it look good.
yeah
Um, but the platform layer, from what I understand, is pretty solid, right? Um,
yeah it's pretty
I it's possible that it's out there. I I saw an article the other day on Hacker News that was talking about open code and how open code is really bad for accessibility because it treats the terminal as a canvas, and as it puts text on the screen, it updates one column and row of text at a time, right? And that's not what screen readers expect at all. They expect like a stream of output, right? They don't actually see the difference. They can't really tell much of a difference between color changing and a character changing and like what you actually want to read out.
this is true for two-way programs.
Yeah, they were
anything
complaining a lot about two
uh,
programs.
in Curse is the same thing. It's pretty normal optimization that you would want to only update a particular row and column, right? That you want to change.
Yeah, they said there was one TUI framework that was decent, but like the popular ones, plus open the code with their own. But there's a popular one in JavaScript called Ink. I think the React wrap for that as well.
Sure.
And like is in the terminal, but it's horrible for accessibility, right?
Yeah.
And like there's gonna be differences with these kinds of things. I just yearn for like settings that it's out of the box that just looks like every other settings app. And like one thing that I was looking really forward to GTK was how you have file view, preferences, right, at the GUI applications. Oh shoot, I'll get out of the box, drop downs, freaking shortcut, little hover text and all that stuff. But it just didn't work. Right?
I mean, I would say with two programs that we've engineered, and do use real 2D rendering frameworks instead of just print.
Yeah.
Because you can just using anti-escape sequences, just how all of the two programs that I've written work. For example, flashcard program that I made. It just uses printf. Because with printf, you can do centering of text with a percent asterisk s thing that allows you to turn in the amount of spaces, and then you can use the anti-escape sequence. I don't know how well those anti-escape sequences work with streamers. I imagine they should.
Yeah,
automatic.
Is there like a POSIX program to draw all the escape codes?
Oh, yeah, there is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's another. Just, you could print the things that you want. Nothing needs to be full on.
So do you? The browser probably shouldn't exist, right? Two frameworks should probably do printf. Framework should probably.
Browsers in the incarnation. HTML and CSS renders.
Really? I feel like that's the bad part.
Modern CSS is not great. but uh, HTML CSS is from like late 90s, early 2000s. I'm not that loaded. It's kind of okay. I mean, if you look at something like the Nitro, that's CSS and HTML.
Well, yeah, like that couldn't happen, right? Because native leapfrog web 1,000 times over, then the web just kind of died, right?
Sure. The thing that web provides is the hypertext.
Well, yeah, but like if web didn't exist, Silicon Valley would have figured out some way to make cross-platform work.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. If web just remained hypertext, when you just link to articles all over the place, we would have completely different cross-platform in Google.
No, I think it would probably have been the better feature.
Probably that is not intuitively so.
What I'm trying to get at is what is legitimate complex software?
It's legitimate. Apart from games, um, there's stuff. You know, like bases. Um, there's a lot of like software and medical software and military software. Like you know, um, but a lot of these are designed in with the same philosophy I was saying with was a little more independent components. I talk one another. Like I was to design an F-16 jet pilot, fighter jet, right? Would have a uh, a because with 16 you need to have redundant. But let's just ignore redundancy right now. You have like a central transaction unit, and this you have this transaction unit interface that would allow people to send things via IPC kind, even just JSON, full like JSON. So it would probably be like JSON, but you know, probably I would just have a shared memory and just do that.
For next team chat, I would probably use shared memory.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! Those things love JSON sockets. JSON networks. That's how they do it. We're not gonna get into it. Um,
If anybody would make their own just binary protocols to save every packet and have most reliability.
but I wish.
What? It's not all like a fixed size like buffer that get thrown over the P.
God, I no the vendors often write stuff in. So there was going to be the form stuff uh, that is strict and over in Ada or C. But a lot of the GUI stuff that you see, a lot of the the new ones anyway, are written in Python.
What?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
Dude, I'd be scared of my fucking mind.
The
Python.
the core systems.
I don't mind Python like, ever. Like,
yeah, but
yeah, I think about that sometimes. The thing that brings me a little calm is the idea that billions of dollars have made off of Python.
Yeah.
I can probably felt, but if I need something, I always do the same thing over and over.
Yeah, that's...
I mean, I guess the thing in interpreter, the interpreter like can't sound because it's so complicated. How are you gonna verify it? Because like the whole thing about Python is simple syntax. The bug should throw like a big red signal, but there's such. Like, I remember when I was first learning programming, my first Python.
It has a lot of very little syntax, but the meaning of the syntax is overloaded. first C and C plus mixed.
Yeah,
Or
like
just C plus plus, I guess.
I literally like you first look at Python and it's like, oh, okay, this is a variable, this is yada.
Yeah.
Then it's like, oh, and by the way, Python like situation like it kind of works like this. Well, okay, you just have to like read between lines. Like it's not good, you know.
I don't know. It's not thinking on a million ways. By Python.
That is not true.
People, maybe undergrads like Python and ML and statistics people. Statistics people are really just ML plan.
Okay, they are.
I don't think they know anything else. They are one of I think some of them might have, but um,
So you'll have a node, okay, but at least that has some kind of like upstates and like multiple stakeholders involved, and a lot of people looking at like they do have a pretty low open community.
so does
I feel like Python as the that one guy that calls all that.
true. I don't actually do anything.
Yeah, Python FL, and he. I mean, this is Python like how good it could be, but
I imagine personally that the actual language be somewhat.
oh yeah, but like they put a statement in pet, right? Like, okay, new pet just dropped, right? What happened today? And it's just, oh, the way, the with keyword, something new. If you put with keyword right behind like async task, like that when async task results, then something happens. You know, it's like, oh, okay, you're using with this now. That's cool.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. Um,
Okay, so all of this you want to know what is software.
Finish software. Okay. So, and part of the thing affects complexity of software that software never finished. Um, in that
Yeah, all your C writing all the CVE, you gotta worry about.
yeah. So uh, so of software be written to so okay. All software is will continue to get updates forever, and it's not uh, patch CVs, security and stability. I'm talking new features, few months, or recent software that you can in, and this means inherently that new features are your code. And if you add more code, scale pretty linearly with more bugs, less stability, and larger attacks. You know, code it does all we said. Pretty simple. But she makes it off because want to software for various reasons. But there is someone to step in. Okay, we're done now. We're just this software is finished. How you do this in like an department is you would respect before you even write this, you write a spec, and then you write back, and you write software to spec, and you done. This is the most firmware is created, right? And you're not BIOS anymore. Those all updated. But for devices, well, you usually just written to it, and then you know the done. And the whole time you relate this, where you have a spec and then done, finished, agree on API with people ahead of time, and you write your software so it does things that is agreed upon, just done. You don't code it. It doesn't get changed. And the only time you do change things is if it's a printing issue. The CPU or the bug, you affect these things. I think these CVs and stability use fix the minimal amount of code. If you've written reasonable code, you can usually fix the get on the line too. It's actually that's one that is the amount of code that you change. And so it's pretty easy to keep track of, and it needs minimal maintenance for everyone. But people don't that software this way. People don't have a final goal of all of this that it could do, and so we get this problem at the daily extent. That's really the idea of finished software. Is you should be able, it should be able to be done.
I feel like this from a couple, like look on like popular open source stuff right now.
Yeah.
Like one a good example. I think anyone should know. They should just go home and have a real thing in Russell. Wow. Make the browser really fast, and they before it so have to go around this giant JavaScript config file to actually use the thing. You can mine all your tailwind inside CSS file. That was the thing before. Well, big, right? Like in the CSS file, like you actually CSS code to find your cursor and find like how what is the radius of borders, like small border radius. You've done this stuff in script files as well. Did a little more in CSS, which makes sense because it's CSS. But kind of what all the people do, right? Like they had a company around for a while that would,
I was just in.
no, they had a little company for a while that would like have like pay them to their designed components, right? That's for them. You would drop down like a tailwind and set that's for you. But tailwind just CSS. If you think about it, it's just a syntax difference. It doesn't enable anything new necessarily. So their design wasn't really that special because they just found people who knew what design because they were successful. But like their job, their thing that they were selling very different, right? It just designed up. I think I packed up on that one because AI is just running all of the code days.
Yeah.
Get the chatbot to have to use down pretty easily, just to make it easier yourself. Again, they're still taken because they do, right? Like their goal to exist. Maybe the goal is to money against someone. They should do things like see stuff like CS consulting, big corporations who the brain of whatever. It's pretty easy to your people. It's good guys hear all this, right? I like the open source community as a has a survey of relevance as like a way for finishing the project, right? Like this is a long time, and adding news, right? The poll came back, and And there are teachers, you go into memory, you fed data. That's it. Like, that's it. Like, I was making players see value stuff a little less annoying because everything.
Okay. They meant very um, uh, data structures. That's the thing, right? Really, the guy, the one of the developers, in a stub implementation, um, uh, but the main with REST and these cases is it's the whole structures that might want, and these are the things you probably want to implement. This is one of the times where it would be probably reasonable to have a dependency, right? You read HW, kind of really have what you're in GD, the same part. Um, that's a big way. Uh, sure, yeah, it's to memory, but it's really out.
Yeah, I don't know. I think
Coding is writing.
I think could have got 5 years ago. Or still much the same. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. So,
Like, one certain level of security in adding features, people who request features are extreme users of your program. Right?
yeah. So,
It is. That's why they're to add features.
yeah.
By definition, like already popular, simply do something useful, so it's going to just do that. This is something around places in which would care in your somewhere else. I feel like this project, it probably all um they already and the nature of developers tools and want to do that. They want to continue and provide value more for these people, which is great if you're, like it's sort of opportunity that most work for free. Like, maybe they should consider packing up shop often.
Yeah, I would say the SQL. SQL has a few update these when they do this security. So uh, I, I,
That's what really is. I feel like my a good story. Like there's those 3 guys that SQL and they don't accept contribution, not really open source community. Really.
sometimes you need um,
Say this. I'm saying that like 3 guys to keep their territory. That's really
that's
good personally.
I, I know that's sometimes what needs what's to have be. I mean, you could use that just have a single or defect could just say it. That would really have the same result.
Yeah, I HTML and they that project made by a professor in in and he made it just about agents.
Yeah.
Got kind of on the like in all Twitter rage for 6 months. Holy moly, can actually write websites in multiple programming language and be pleasant because as long as your language is a library or tag around sending email. You know, you create points that have pretty sensitivity, right? And that is like a concept of after 0.0
Yeah.
last minute was and we just you know they fix in there. They're not adding features. They're I think phrasing and good at that because one of the cool HTML is that you can like go really web programming and just in HTML far out, right?
Yeah.
Have
It has wrong jQuery.
no, exactly. I just in like the guy who did he said this is played and kind of web programmer. Like who would have
Okay, you were saying.
I was talking about how the HTMX guy said, "Hey, we're feature complete," and how does one know if it's feature complete, right? If you have a whole bunch of people clamoring at your door saying, "I want more features. This is amazing. Please give me more." How do you say no to those people? Isn't that also kind of weird? Like, what if Linux stopped at 4.0, right? And they just did drivers forever.
Kind of what they do.
Wait, really?
Yeah, core kernel stuff doesn't really change that often.
What about like IOU ring and stuff like that? Isn't that new?
That's new. That's fair. That's a new API interface. So okay, they do add stuff sometimes. But the reason I was defending Redis is the same reason why I would defend the kernel in this way, is because the things that they create are independent optional components. A lot of the time, they're not like core API changes. It's just like, here is a new module, right? That you get to do new stuff
Well,
on.
that's what
Or
most people do. Most people don't
driver.
break APIs.
Sure, but when you it's so independent that when you compile it, you can just compile it without that thing in it,
Okay.
right? Like it's just not there.
Right.
Um,
I also think that programmers see programming as an infinite game. Like, because you can make an arbitrarily complex system, you can just be Terry Davis and make your own compiler and operating system and compositor and all these things. You can do that your entire life, right?
yeah,
So the idea that I don't know, like I run into this too sometimes where it's like I I want a lot of stuff, right? Personally. Like I have more ideas than I have time, and that is very frustrating. Um and so I go back and I add features and like you know, I genuinely don't understand the idea of being the Tailwind guy for years at a time, like working in the same domain for that long.
yeah,
And like Redis, like you implemented a data structure that's going to be used by people. It's going to be awesome, very performant, you know, and it might like be somebody's favorite thing in the whole wide world.
yeah,
But it's work. It's not like I don't know. I always find it weird. Like, what is the line between helping somebody create something and creating something yourself, right? Like like you can get all the way up to Apple, right? Apple makes MacBooks and watches and all these things.
mm-hmm.
But like they don't like they're computers, but they're to be like they mean nothing without somebody to use them, right? Like if they make what did they make recently? They make like the MacBook Neo. Like that's a cool product, right? With interesting engineering challenges and
Mm-hmm.
everything. But it's still just a laptop, you know? Like I don't know. I just but then again, like I could say it's just a whatever to like basically anything. And I don't know. I always find it weird to draw the line between that. Because if anything is literally a product that means something in the real world, it is a cheap MacBook that performs pretty decently, right? But like, you know what I mean? Like, but then there's the other end of a dev tool that helps you write CSS that like is cool and I like it personally. But like so where would you find like the meaning of the software? Is it just the pursuit of the craft, you know, making something really good?
Yeah. Um, I mean, there's also there's another thing aside from enjoyment. There's also stuff like perfectionism that would drive people to want to make changes to their software forever. Um, which is why I think it's even more important to draw a line in the sand.
Mm-hmm.
Um, being able to finish software means that you can go back to the drawing board more frequently. And being able to design software from the bottom up is a very important and very useful skill. And it will mean that you'll be able to write even better software. More likely than not, if you go back to the drawing board, you'll be able to write it better again.
I have a
Uh,
second idea. You know.
and yeah, sure, I have more than one good idea in my life, right? I hope. Um, and so, uh, being a it makes it easier if you have a spec that you want to comply to, but obviously not everyone has is writing something that has a spec already written for it, and if you're just writing something on your own, writing a spec ahead of time is hard, and so um, this falls very neatly into API driven development, right? Um, when I say this, I want to be very specific. Um, uh, I really just mean like the the literal types and functions that you expose to the end user, right? Or even to yourself when you're dog fooding a particular module. Um, is you'll write in, for example, C or C++, just a header file with the full declarations of all the functions that you might want to ever use. And then you just implement that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, uh, and it's very clear when you're done because you've implemented all the things and it's done now. And maybe you make small changes as you're writing the code because you realize that
Your API
that,
sucks.
your API was wrong or was missing something very fundamental as you were writing it, and you now know these things because you've written it. But it's very easy to know when you're done, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you never really need to go back to it, basically ever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that allows you to finish things a lot more easily, um, even without a spec. And I would encourage people to do that more. I don't really know where I was going with this. I'm sorry.
No, that's great.
Um, I feel like there are real solutions to a lot of the problems that people have, or a lot of the problems that software does have. There are a lot of solutions, and they're usually pretty simple ones. It just so happens that uh, there are a lot of ideas on how to do programming. Programming is not a science, and so there are a lot of conventions, as I've said multiple times now at this point, that people have adopted and have resulted in code not being that great.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So when do you think you're going to be done with your game engine? As in, like, what functionality do you need with your game? Like, do you know all of the things that your game engine is going to need to do already?
um, so there are a lot of so the way that I develop it is pieces of functionality. Um, and you need to choose very carefully which parts are dependent on one another and which ones are independent of one another. Um, so there's an independent physics engine, an independent platform layer, an independent renderer, and an independent um, uh, entity component system, and a independent model system. And these are generally all you need to create a modern 3D game. Um, now, it within these, there's a lot of uh, things, right? So if I wanted to have springs between joints, that is obviously very dependent on the physics engine, and so it would need to be written in the physics engine. Just like how if you have a particle system, that will very likely need to be written specifically for your rendering engine. Um, to be fair, if I was to rewrite this again, I would write an RHI, so it isn't rendering system specific, but it would be RHI specific. Because currently my game engine relies very specifically on Vulkan, and I wouldn't be able to switch it out for OpenGL trivially. That's a bad design choice when I first made it that I wouldn't make again. Um, but um,
How would you know what the API of the RHI should be if
so RHI so
it's GPU code? Like, I mean, I guess you could say like render sprite or whatever.
uh yeah, I mean how RHIs are developed are a very involved process that I'm not too familiar with. Um, but once you're familiar with creating a rendering backend, um, I'm sure that you would have a good idea of all the things that you might want to be able to expose to a rendering front end. Um,
See, um for my Canvas application,
yeah,
I accidentally stumbled backwards into model view controller
yeah,
where I have the data, um, rendering that data and mutating that data, right?
yeah,
And I have actually found that to be a very good way to do my 2D application.
yeah,
Probably doesn't apply very well to a 3D game with physics, but because for me the platform layer is already handled by MGUI.
yeah,
Um, but so like when you're talking about having a very small exposure of API surface, like for
mm-hmm.
me everything is kind of exposed because somebody's going to need to control something and somebody is going to need to render something. I mean, I hide a lot of the rendering stuff a little bit more than the other stuff, but like somebody's going to need to mutate the data and read the data and do some
Yeah,
IO. I have an IO layer that's a little bit. I have some abstractions for platforms, stuff like that, for writing files and getting files
yeah,
and stuff. But I don't know. I kind of wish that I would subscribe to this idea of very, very small API surface. But in order to do that, I would need to co-locate rendering, controlling, and the data together. And for me, that would be a recipe for disaster. That just sounds really difficult, you know? Like if I had the
I
idea,
think co-locating data and logic inside of the module is doable as long as the lifetimes of the objects are available. I mean, there are really only three lifetime classes: entire program, uh, transient, arena based, and um,
well, for me, everything is alive for the entire program.
sure. A lot of programs only ever need that, right? What about nodes and connections? That's transient.
I mean, it gets put up to the global state.
Yeah, but independently they can be created and deleted
Yeah,
arbitrarily, so
yeah,
their lifetime is not for the entire program's runtime.
yeah. But the structure of like where I hold them is.
Sure.
Or do you count like user input as a part of this lifetime? I mean, it's just a dynamic array that has like I make an edge.
If you're allocating memory, it needs to have a lifetime. That well implicitly has a lifetime.
Yeah, the entire program.
I guess if you never shrink the size of the array, it only gets
C++
bigger.
handles that. I don't have a
Okay, let's just
single malloc or anything inside of my 15,000 line C++ program.
constructors and destructors are doing this stuff.
I don't use those.
The vec has constructor and destructor.
Oh, okay.
Standard STL things.
But to me, it's just a stack allocated variable. Fucking, I don't care. Like, is in the function. It's in the scope of the function. Like the lifetime is the function because it's internal to the. I don't. I did bite myself in the butt a couple times with not stinted moving, doing a mem copy of some dynamic arrays and stuff. But for the most part, everything is just go straight up to the global state struct.
Yeah. God object programming is fine. You'll learn to know when you should do that and when you shouldn't do the God object. Uh,
God object, that's what y'all call it.
that's the term for one big fat struct.
I love that God object.
It's the fat struct that
I'm
has
gonna
everything.
rename it to that. Right now it's just called project. What a lame fucking L. Actually, I think it's called app state.
Oh, that's even
Yeah, project is inside of app state.
That's very common. Yeah.
Yeah, app state is not gonna be God object. Holy shit.
Um.
I've actually like confused myself. Like, am I looking for project or am I looking for app state? But if it was called God object, that would be very clear as to what the purpose of this object is.
Yeah.
It's just const God equals.
Yeah.
That's just so silly.
Yeah. So.
No, but like I need the controllers because like or sometimes I need to resolve some data. Like for example, I have a node which in my application is just a square. So my application you have squares, and you have little squares inside the squares, and those little squares have edges to other little squares. That's basically the whole program. I put text in a couple of different places, but that's the gist of it, right?
Yeah.
And like sometimes I need to know how big should the size be because it's in a grid and I have a camera, right, that zooms in and zooms out. And so if I zoom out, well, then that means the square is going to get smaller, right? And for example, like I have a preview window on the side, and sometimes I'm going to want to show a node in that little preview window. What should the size be if I render at 50% zoom? Right? Sure, I could just simply take the width and the height and multiply it by the zoom, but I already have a function for that somewhere, right? So I feel like I should probably just use that function, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
The camera colon how big is my freaking node right now, right?
Okay. I feel like we need to have a more in-depth conversation, just us, on like this kind of system design. But yeah, 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 yeah.
Like, there's lots of different like components that want to know about the state of other components sometimes, you know? So I just had the camera module TM that is completely independent somehow of all the other stuff. Like, I don't know.
Well, you should be able to. So I don't mind being so. Sorry, I shouldn't. This isn't really an opinionated. I guess everything here is opinionated, but when you design like a system like this, being able to access the internal state of the system is fine, in my opinion. You should be able to access the internal system as the caller of the function. It shouldn't be hidden from you. This is the difference with modules from OOP land, right? I can. There's no encapsulation here. I can look in at the thing, right? Um, Preferably don't edit it, but you can if you want, if you know what you're doing. But you should be able to, as the main program that has these two components, like the camera and the view that has the grid on it, right? You can look in to both of these modules and know what the current state of it is, and then orchestrate the conversation between the two of them. You really don't want to have these two modules talking to one another without talking through your main program, just because then there's this implicit thing going on, and this gets especially bad if you have independent modules running on separate threads, right? So my physics thread and my audio thread, or my physics module and my audio module run on separate threads, right? From the main thread, as does the rendering thread. You can have more threads for any of them. Becomes a little more obvious when you think about a module in terms of a thread, because then you're thinking about
An extremely costly
data.
communication.
Well, no, you can have shared memory. That's not a problem. That's not the problem I'm talking about. I'm talking about data integrity and
That's what I meant.
data invalidation. You don't want these different threads talking with one another without talking to the main thread, because that's just asking for them to. I mean, you can do it, but anytime there is a bug with the communication, it becomes horrible to debug. Now maybe that's just a skill issue on my part. Maybe it's fine to have a shared memory in the object in the physics land, and the audio is looking at the shared memory and it sees that, oh, this element in this shared memory array got updated, so I can fire this event to make this sound. And maybe that's fine if there's only one writer and one reader. But as with all multi-threaded stuff, it gets really complicated when there's multiple threads talking to one another instead of talking to one main thread.
Justified complicated software. Very interesting. Very interesting.
Sometimes you want to have a program that has lots of threads. I don't know.
Okay. Right, so you also had on here when to reiterate or when to reinvent the wheel versus DRY.
Dry, yeah. Because in clean code, there's a thing called dry, which is don't repeat yourself.
That's just everybody says that. It's not just it's just a normal thing.
I know it's a normal thing, but I just want to attribute it to clean code because I find that funny.
Everything I don't like is clean code. The more I don't like it, the more clean code it is.
Sure. I don't really have a particular antagonism with clean code. I think it's bad, but I don't really ever interact with it, so I don't care. But there are times, I would argue, that some people might not like, is that there are times when you should reinvent the wheel. For example, I've been talking about this quite a bit, but platform layer. You should make your own platform layer. Okay, people don't like this idea for some reason, but it's very simple.
If the platform layer was good,
My platform layer is great.
then it should be so generic that anybody can use it.
You can use it for anything.
Then why'd you make a second one?
I didn't. I use the same platform layer in all the projects that I've used so far, made so far, that
Oh,
have it
really?
instead of GLFW. Yeah, I use it for all of my projects. It's great.
Do you vendor it or something? Like, what do you?
Yeah. I just put it in the project.
What happens if you update the platform layer on one project?
Well, the other project doesn't need that, so it doesn't have it.
What if you like fix a bug or something?
I'll update the bug in the other thing then. If it's just a small bug change, then yeah, I can just copy it.
Okay.
That's a great thing with vendoring, by the way. It's... Anyway, what's the question again? Oh, reinventing the wheel, right?
So you
Great
say
example. Recently, I re-implemented Sixel rendering. We'll have Sixel, right? We all like looking at images in our terminal. That's totally what it's there for. That's totally why we have terminals, to look at images inside of them, right? But the original implementation, I forget the Japanese guy that made it, was pretty simple. It was pretty simple. However, I used GDI to draw it, which was not great. So
why is GDI not great?
because it's a general purpose drawing canvas thing that pulls in a couple dozen dependencies. I'll show you later. It's not great. And so some people later came along and created something called libsixel, which is it implements the same protocol. It implements both the front end and the back end. And then lots of terminals will use the back end to interpret any program that sends it this front end protocol to render the image, right? However, it's a classic Maison CMake C library that you build, has a dozen or more files that it then compiles and links together in one SO file that you link against, and it's the classic dynamic linking fun business. And I was like, wow, this API sucks. And I don't want to have someone need to dynamically link against it in a makefile, which means that they need to download it from the package manager or compiler themselves. So I took the onus on re-implementing it. I didn't do a lot of the complicated parts. I did do the literal characters, right? You do the square brackets, 6 square brackets to do the start of the thing, and you append characters, and it's a little writer thing. The more complicated parts, like writing a full land source image scaling thing to have so API it's a single file, a header that says, hey, take this memory or this file name that uses the ISO fopen fread API to open the file, use STB image decoding PNG and JPEG, various image formats, and there is various functions for decoding, encoding raw RGB data, a PNG, JPEG, etc. data from memory into the into Sixel format, or rendering directly from file to screen. Right, they're all things that you might want to do at front end Sixel implementation. And this was about 800 lines of code, give or take. Um, and
800 lines of pure mainline C99. Okay, straight to the veins.
also, I mean, there's a whole, there's a lot to be said about C standard verse. It could be said that it'd be better to write it in C89, but that's another. I just like standard int.
Fuck it, C1. Okay.
No, no, pre ISO C.
KNRC. Okay.
KNRC is not good. Okay, I don't. That's just bad. It is actually just bad. Um, uh, we all love trigraph, we. So
Trigraphs are like, who cares trigraphs?
me, I don't trigraphs.
Just don't use them.
Why is it a standard? Why does anyone need to?
Think of the poor British people who don't have all of the American keys.
Can I just say that ISO is the body that creates the British keyboard and the C standard, not ANSI? Can I just put that out there quickly? It's not ANSI that created the C standard. So it is actually the British keyboard, just more in line. Anyway, put that out there.
Didn't they just get rid of trigraphs like last year?
Yes, 23 trigraphs.
So C99 has them?
Yes, C9 does have trigraphs and C3 does not have trigraphs.
Use C23 then.
No. No.
It's like your thing isn't about trigraphs.
It's because C11 and C23 implemented so many more horrible features apart from atomics. Atomics is atomics.
Just don't use those features.
I don't use those features. That's why I use C99.
You can continue not using features in C23.
Yeah, but if I can pedantically verify using the compiler that it is C99, then it'll compile on any C99 compiler. You know, maybe I want to compile for a shitty
For the people that are traveling to
the shitty
1999.
for the shitty 16-bit machine.
If you time travel to 1999, you need to compile a program. Okay, bring a thumb drive. Okay, the 23 compiler, right?
No. There are actually compilers that aren't playing in GCC. I know it's hard to imagine for someone whose languages that they use only have one compiler.
Built web standards that have a bajillion implementations. There's like 6 serious JavaScript on the server times right now. You got Node-Bun, Dino, Cloudflare Workers, Amazon's got one, and Hermes. Okay, that's more than you. Okay, for sure.
No, there are.
In the browser, by the way, that's 7.
There's literally hundreds of C compilers.
Yeah, but how many others people actually use?
5 or 6.
I got 7.
Nathan.
7 good ones. People don't really use the Amazon one, but
Okay. Well now.
yeah.
Okay. I always forget.
You're the one jabbing at me. You're the one saying, "Oh, this is so hard to understand from people who use one and do another compiler." But
Sorry, I was
you
not.
can't
I
make
was thinking about JavaScript.
you can't make that accusation.
I wasn't. Okay, JavaScript is a pass because that's standard. Okay, I was talking about other languages. To be fair, those JavaScript implementations don't follow us very closely because they're not script compliant. So sure.
They're not ECMAScript client.
They implement all of ECMAScript. They have a lot of extensions.
Yeah.
Okay. But wouldn't it be better like the ECMAScript standard, more feature complete, and like all the JavaScript runtimes implemented ECMAScript, and so there was actually direct translation between the different Java runtimes. I'm sure at the moment, clearly write something for Node and run it on Dino, if I'm not mistaken.
It's actually really funny. They put out a post
Because like, unlike with GCC, XCC, and TCC, you can code for any of them and any of them will compile them.
See, I didn't know this. Um, so Bun talks about like how much their node compatibility stuff is good and everything, and just like yeah, like I thought they put out a thing about how they're passing all the tests or whatever. They did put out an article this week about how their new version is huge step forward. They're passing over 70% of the node tests. I'm like 70%. That's horrible. And they had it next to Bun, and Bun's at like 5%. I'm like, wait, what the fuck is going on? I thought like Bun was passing like 99% of the node tests. Like, okay. They were just picking ones that mattered or whatever, but yeah.
Anyway, as I was saying about
But those actually don't matter. Most of the nodes are free. Nobody can use it anyways. Okay, like people use that fast. Like that's about it. Okay. How is ECMAScript supposed to make a file system API thing when the browser doesn't have file systems? Like that doesn't make sense.
acknowledging the fact that JavaScript exists, having extension and extension for the ECMAScript standard specifically states, for JavaScript on the server isn't the browser.
Mm.
But what is OpenFRA and FRA? Is that a platform agnostic file system interface? Or that's crazy. Well, anyway. Reinventing the wheel.
Dry. Talk about Sixel is something that you reinvented because you reinvented it in a good software way. If it doesn't have complete featurality.
Yeah, it doesn't have a back implementation. Front end implementation. Yeah. It's just fine. For example, with STP image, a lot of the time you really won't be doing one of the coding processes for a lot of formats, and in the case of image format, what you really won't be able to do is them. Sometimes you don't want to write encode images, right? All the time you don't do that, so you just have decoding, and so that's all that library targets. And being aware of constraints is another very important thing, tying back into like software complexity and when a piece of software is finished. Same thing with reinventing the wheel of a constraint